Okay, Painting 1 class, this video will be about when you start painting on this project, what should you paint first? I'm going to use a tree as an example, but a lot of things could apply to this. A tree just really works for this example for several reasons that we will get to. So I've got two halves of my sketchbook right here. And by the way, I'm going to have you guys do this in your own sketchbooks as well. And I do want you to use a tree. So over here, we did the tree first, and we're going to do the background second. Over here, we're going to do the background first, so that's done, and then paint a tree over that. I want you to think right now, what's going to work better, doing the tree first or the background first? So this tree is already kind of finished. So if I was going to add a background after doing the tree, here's how this might look. I've got all these little negative spaces in the tree where I can see through it, and then I've got all this space around it, and that needs to be blue because I want that to be like the sky. So out here, okay, that's pretty easy. I can paint that blue. Pretty easy, right? But then when I get up to the tree, it's like I'm painting around every little leaf and every little branch. I have to get the blue paint in between here, and I want it to not look like the blue is on top of the tree. I want it to look like it's behind the tree. And so probably you're thinking, okay, that's not a good way to do this, right? If I did my tree first on my painting and then I put work into that, and then I want to paint whatever's behind it, I'm thinking to myself, oh my gosh, why did I do this? Why did I paint the tree first? It's really hard to paint in these little spaces. It's really hard to paint around all this stuff without accidentally painting over it. We don't want our sky to be over the tree. We want it to be behind the tree. So this, we don't want to do this. Okay, don't do it like that. A tree is a good example because it's got a lot of little spaces between those leaves and branches. But a lot of other subjects would do something similar. Even a more simple subject. If we just had a simple circular shape, and then we wanted to paint around that. Let's say we had a yellow background. Well, it's hard to make that yellow background go around it without that overlapping the edges of our circle, right? So always paint background first. So on this other half, we've got our background here already. And I'm going to show you, not that everybody's drawing a tree and painting a tree on this project, but at some point you might want to paint a tree. So over here, we're going to paint a tree. I'm going to show you how I paint a tree, and you can try it. A couple things to avoid when painting trees is this. Okay, if you're painting a pine tree, it's not a perfect triangle. If you're painting a deciduous tree with leaves, it's not. Okay, we're not painting a lollipop here, a broccoli flavored lollipop. We're painting a tree, a natural tree. Now, if you're painting a tree that's been pruned or trimmed, maybe that's a little bit different, but a natural tree will be very different. So what I always do is background first, whatever's behind it. So it's like the sky behind it here. Then I paint the trunk. And always make sure that a tree trunk is bigger at the bottom, and then it gets smaller as it goes up. And don't think that it has to be super straight. It can be curvy and wobbly and knobbly. And some branches. I'll be doing a pine tree here, just for this example. The branches is like your skeleton, right? Your bones inside your body. It's what gives the tree a framework and a form, shape. Okay, so if I want maybe up here, maybe a long branch, and most of the branches up here are shorter, I can do that. I can make some branches look like they're not even attached. And and then maybe I'll even add some shading. If there's light coming from the left side, then I might have a little bit of a darker color over on the left side. Maybe I'll even add some of that to the tree branches a little bit. Keep in mind that most of, not all of, but most of these branches and a lot of the trunk will be covered up. Don't put too much effort into this at this point. Now you're going to start adding the leaves of the pine needles and use those branches as a place to sort of gather those green blobs, but let those green blobs go other places as well. There might be some places where the needles of the tree are visible to your eye, but the twigs and the little tiny branches are not. And start with just one shade of green or whatever color you want the leaves of the needles to mostly be. Notice how I'm overlapping the trunk in some places, other places letting the trunk show through. Same thing with the branches. Let some of those show through and let some of the leaves cover parts of the branches. So, most of the time a pine tree is a vaguely triangular shape, but definitely not like a perfect triangle like what I showed you down below. I think this branch was kind of too fat at the end, so I'm going to cover up most of that part, let other parts of it show. And don't think too hard about it either. Just get some paint in there, give it some form, some volume with that green. Maybe there's a couple branches that don't really have any of the pine needles on them. Now I want this tree to be a little bit more full towards the bottom, so I'm going to just add quite a bit more down here. A little bit more there. And you get the idea. Now, if I was going to keep going with this, maybe add some shading, some shadow, I would take a darker green. And again, we said before that the trunk is darker on the right side. So a lot of these needles on the right side, we're going to get some darker tones in there. But even some on the left, all right? Some of these branches on the left side will also have some shadow. It's just we might have more of it on the right. You can do this with several shades of green. Throw some blue in there, throw some purple in there, even some red. If there's sunlight shining on it, especially if it's a sunset, get some warm colors in there. Orange, yellow, red. If it's a gray sky, then try to make the colors a little bit more muted by mixing complementary colors together, colors that are opposite from each other. If it's a clear blue sky, kind of like this, then, if it's a green tree, it's going to look green. If it's a dark sky, like it's almost nighttime, you're not going to have as much of that color showing. It's going to be a little bit more blackish with some more neutral, darker tones. And highlights, you can add some, some brighter yellows in there. I might just do a little bit of that. Like there's sunlight shining on it. Mostly towards the top, a little bit in some other spots. And if you think that color is too bright, which I think it is, go back in there and add some of that darker yellow or change it. Nice thing about acrylic paint, especially after it's dry, just go paint back over it if something didn't look so good. Paint back over it. But the point here is, guys, notice all these little spaces between the leaves, between the branches. We've already got our blue color there. If we didn't have that background there already, it would be really hard to add it in at this point. Last little thing just for fun. Maybe there's some snow on the tree. So if you added some white, maybe there's some snow that kind of fell and still clinging to some of these branches. And And right now I'm painting wet on wet, so you can see some of the colors are mixing. And that sometimes is okay. Other times, you might want to let it dry first. Get the ground put in here, maybe some snow on the ground. And I would paint this ground before you paint another tree here. You know, if I'm painting a tree in front of this, I want to have that ground put in there first before I paint another tree in there. You start doing those branches, right? So most important thing to take away from this is anything that is behind something else in your picture, paint that first. Background, paint that first. Subject matter like a tree or something else, paint that next. Second, third, fourth, whatever it is. So I want you to try this in your own sketchbook. Really just try painting the tree. You don't have to do both. I want you to paint background first with some kind of color, maybe a wash of a color, and then try painting a tree like this. Avoid these. Okay, these are bad. Don't do these. Try painting a tree that looks more like that as much as you can.